The Living Your Best Life Experiment, week 33. Yes, you heard that, 33. There is no week 32. Why? Because life is hectic sometimes, and it's taking me 2 weeks to get through this chapter. And I'm okay with that because I'm still progressing, and as long as I'm going forward, I'm not going back. So here's this week's chapter. Chapter 8, You. This chapter starts out with a statement of how we've blinded ourselves with our temporary solutions and a mirage of the future, and we can't see the illusions that we've created, thusly hiding what the root cause of our self-sabotages are. And it talks about our personal conclusions. What conclusions have we come to about ourselves that sabotage us? We talk about how personal conclusions are rarely positive, and that a lot of the times when we say we've overcome stuff, that we're really just putting a little pony glitter on top of it. A little rainbow dash power, one might say. And he asks, do you even realize what yours are? What are your personal conclusions about yourself? Not the stuff you tell yourself to pump yourself up, but the baseline conclusions that are holding you back. And he says that this is the baseline at which everything is based on. So everything you do and that happens in your life is based around the personal conclusions that you've come to about yourself. And he starts throwing around ways that we can start figuring out what that is. He says, what is your go-to when you're down? When something bad happens, when you're feeling down and out, what do you go to first? Do you go to something like, I'm not smart enough, I'm too different, it doesn't matter, I'm incapable, I'm not lovable? What is the baseline that you go to when things go completely sideways? He says to fully get the grasp of what your personal conclusions are, you need to think about all of the experiences that you've had in your life that has left a mark on you, and draw from that what you have concluded about yourself. And it's kind of like doom and gloom a bit, because you're thinking, if these personal conclusions are something that I can't change, really, then where does that leave me? And then he goes on to say that not everyone with this kind of internal conclusion is down and out. Otherwise, there would be no successful people. There would be no happy people in this world. And he says people mostly keep it hidden out of sight. These are usually things that people don't want to put out there in the public eye to let people know that they're dealing with these things, to be vulnerable. It's a tough position to put yourself in. So then a lot of people just end up living in a state of overcoming the obstacles that your personal conclusions create and pretending to everybody else that you don't have your own personal struggles, that you're not dealing with these personal conclusions. And that a lot of the times we're governed with how we want others to see us. How do we want to present ourselves to the world? And presenting yourself with your personal conclusions very visible is very vulnerable and hard for people to do. And then he asks you to ask yourself, what are you working to maintain? What perception are you working to maintain with everybody else? He's not asking you to go out in the street and scream at the top of your lungs, but just sit down and be completely honest with yourself about what things are you hiding from other people? What are you holding back? Then it goes into a little story about if you've ever watched A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and that part where the ghosts come to Scrooge and they're showing him his past, and he makes a statement that you can't blame him for those things that have happened. And that, in a way, is Scrooge's statement that he can't face that he was the cause of how his life turned out in the end. And he wasn't responsible for the things that other people did, but as he moved on in his life, he created this place where he felt that he wasn't deserving of love and created a very isolated living for himself. So figuring out what the underlying dilemma is really important. At any time, if Scrooge figured that out, he would have realized there was plenty of people around who loved him and were willing to give him love. And then he just reiterates again, think of the times that you were struggling and what keeps popping up. Try to find the pattern of what keeps popping up in certain scenarios. Is it in your love life? Is it in your work life? What scenarios keep popping up when you find yourself struggling? And then he kind of gives a couple scenarios about things you can think about, like parties and social settings. Do you just not go or not participate because you say you don't like those things, but really there's an underlying issue? Why you chose your job? Was it something that you were excited about doing, or something you felt safe, or something they just happened to end up there with? Your love life. Why is your love life the way it is? Maybe you don't have issues in your love life. Maybe you do. So really take a look at the areas of your life in which you're struggling at and see if you can figure out what those patterns are. And then at the end, he asks you to write out your personal conclusion. I am blank. Whatever the fill in the blank is, that's what your personal conclusion is. And there doesn't only have to be one. You can have many personal conclusions about yourselves, just as long as you understand and realize what they are. And then he talks about how success comes from the awareness of your personal conclusions, and that it really allows a life outside of its predictable grips. So understanding and recognizing when your personal conclusions are taking control of a situation is really part of how we overcome them. And then he alludes to the next section, which is people, and how we live our life on a backdrop of people and our personal conclusions about people, everybody in general that we've ever come across or not come across in our lives. And that if we choose to eliminate people from our lives, from dealing with them, or we choose to be very private, even privacy is a very public statement. If you choose to cut somebody off, they are very aware that you have cut them off and that you have chosen to take that privacy. So for this week, I used this very blurry, out of focus photo of myself, and I use this because I love this photo. I don't generally like having my picture taken at all, and this was a sneak shot by my niece, and she really captured a moment of pure joy, happiness, and contentment. And I can't remember where this picture was taken, but it was a real statement on how overcoming your personal conclusions can lead to wonderful moments like this. There were so many times in my life where something like this wasn't obtainable because of my own personal conclusions that I've come to with my experiences. A lot of my personal conclusions come down to simple fear. There is a lot of fear that I picked up growing up, and then with my anxiety, that creates an additional layer of fear. And sometimes it's rational and sometimes it's very irrational. And really understanding where those feelings are coming from and whether or not they deserve validation, or whether it is something that I need to feel uncomfortable in that moment in order to overcome. And for a lot of years, even saying that I had anxiety was something that I couldn't do. Put myself in a position where other people know and can see my fears was really difficult for me, and was really a disservice to myself because I wasn't allowing myself to be human, and I was really living in that world of pretending to be fine when I really wasn't. And I really think this one picture kind of brings a lot of those fears together to show that, it can be overcome and that we can reach those moments. I still have a huge fear of flying. I'm a nervous wreck every time I had to fly. But I had to get on a plane to get here. And, fear of situations that I'm not in control of. My social anxiety. There's so many things that would have rationally been able to stop that trip, stop that moment, if I had let myself give into those, I guess, in a way. And really being comfortable with being uncomfortable and understanding that it's okay to have those fears. It's okay to voice those fears, but not letting those fears dictate how I live and what I do. And really being able to understand when they're taking place, and that in itself has given me a huge perspective and has really opened up the world to me. So for this chapter, I feel like it's an important one. It's something that I've, over the last 10 years or so, have really been working on myself. And I feel like I'm at a point where I really do understand what my personal conclusions are. And I do agree that they have really helped me a lot. So until next week, I hope everybody has a good week. Bye.